Sophia's hands trembled as she stared at the glowing screen of her phone. Her heart pounded as the headline burned into her mind. Billionaire heiress Olivia Montgomery marries rising entrepreneur Lucas Reed in a lavish ceremony. Below the text, a picture showed Olivia in a sparkling white gown, her hand delicately placed over Lucas's chest as he smiled at the camera. His usual, confident, smug smile. The same smile that had once belonged to her. Her fingers curled around the phone, her breath shaky. Just 2 years ago, Lucas had whispered promises of forever in her ear. They had planned a future together, dreamed of a life built on love and hard work. But he had lied. While she had struggled to support him, sacrificing her own dreams to help him build his business, he had been planning something else, something that didn't include her. He had used her as a stepping stone, and once he got close enough to real wealth, he had thrown her away like she meant nothing. The memory of that night came rushing back, suffocating her. It was raining. She had just come home, exhausted from working extra shifts, only to find Lucas standing by the window, his back turned to her. She had sensed something was off, but she had never imagined what was coming. "I'm leaving, Sophia." His voice had been cold, distant. No hesitation. She had laughed, thinking it was a joke. "What? Lucas, what are you talking about?" He turned, and for the first time she saw something different in his eyes. No love, no regret, just ambition. "I've met someone. Olivia Montgomery. You know who she is, don't you? Her family owns half the businesses in this city." Sophia felt the floor slip beneath her. "What are you saying? Lucas, I gave everything for you. I believed in you when no one else did. And I'm grateful for that," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "But gratitude isn't love. You and I, we were never going to make it. I want more than struggling for the rest of my life. I want a real future." Tears had blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. "So you're leaving me because she's rich?" He sighed, as if she was being unreasonable. "I need someone who matches my ambition. Olivia is the kind of woman who belongs in my world. You never will." His words cut deeper than any knife. She had fought the urge to break down, to beg, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she watched as he packed his things, walked out of the door, and disappeared into the night, taking her trust, her dreams, and everything she had built with him. Now, 2 years later, he was standing beside a billionaire's daughter, living the life he had always wanted. He had it all. And what did she have? Nothing. Sophia took a deep breath, her grip tightening around the phone. The pain that had once crushed her now simmered into something else, something stronger. Rage, determination, revenge. Lucas Reed thought he had won. He thought she was nothing without him. But he had no idea what was coming. Fate had given her a second chance, and this time she wouldn't waste it. The night Lucas left had marked the beginning of Sophia's darkest days. She had lost everything, not just him, but the future she had spent years believing in. The apartment they had shared was no longer hers. It had been in his name. The money she had poured into his startup had vanished without a trace, absorbed into his growing success. Even the job she had depended on slipped away when the weight of heartbreak made it impossible to focus. The world moved forward while she remained stuck, drowning in the betrayal. For weeks, she wandered through the ruins of her life, trying to make sense of it all. She had been loyal, supportive, and patient, the kind of woman who stood by a man's side no matter what. But in the end, none of it had mattered. Lucas had taken all that love and turned it into currency, exchanging it for a life of luxury beside a woman who had never lifted a finger to build him up. Sophia found herself crashing on a friend's couch, eating whatever cheap meals she could afford, and scrolling through social media, only to see Olivia and Lucas plastered across every headline. They were New York's new power couple, celebrated, envied, adored. Lucas had stepped into a world he never belonged to, yet he fit in perfectly. He had always been good at pretending. It was a cruel joke. How was it that the man who had deceived, used, and abandoned her was now basking in success while she was barely scraping by? The injustice of it ate at her, keeping her awake at night, fueling the anger she tried so hard to suppress. One evening, as she sat in a small dimly lit cafe, stirring a cup of coffee she could barely afford, an old memory resurfaced. It was from the early days, back when Lucas had been just a dreamer with nothing to his name. He had told her something once, a careless remark she had brushed off at the time. "Soph, you know what they say. It's not about who works the hardest, it's about who plays the smartest. The world doesn't reward good people, it rewards winners." She had laughed then, thinking it was nothing more than one of his cynical views on life. But now, looking back, she realised he had always been this way. He had never cared about morals, love, or loyalty. To him, people were just stepping stones. She had been his biggest one, and she was done being walked over. That night, something shifted inside her. She was tired of being the victim, tired of feeling powerless. If the world didn't reward good people, then maybe it was time to stop playing nice. Lucas had played the game and won. Now it was her turn. But where would she even start? She had nothing. No money, no career, no connections. The old Sophia would have given up, but the new Sophia refused to. She had always been smart. If Lucas could climb her way up by using people, she could rise without anyone's help. She started small. First, she picked herself up and got a job. Not just any job, but one that placed her near powerful people. She worked her way into the corporate world, learning everything she could about business, finance, and strategy. She observed, she listened, she absorbed information like a sponge. And then, fate stepped in. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Sophia had been working late, sorting through documents at the investment firm where she had recently started as an assistant. She had been so focused that she barely noticed when a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit walked in. The moment she looked up, she recognized him. Adrian Calloway, the self-made millionaire and one of the most influential investors in the country. She had read about him before, ruthless in business, untouchable in status. He was known for turning nobodies into power players if they proved themselves worthy. If there was anyone who could open doors to the world she needed to enter, it was him. And just like that, she saw her way in. Adrian didn't notice her at first. Why would he? She was just an assistant. But Sophia wasn't planning to stay invisible for long. Over the next few weeks, she made sure he noticed her work ethic, her intelligence, her hunger to learn. When she spoke, she made every word count. Then, one day, it happened. He called her into his office. "You're different," he said, his sharp eyes studying her. "Most people come into this industry looking for a paycheck. But you're looking for something else." She didn't hesitate. "I want power. I want to be in a room where real decisions are made." Adrian smirked, amused by her bluntness. "And what exactly do you plan to do with that power?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Destroy someone who doesn't deserve it." For a moment, Adrian said nothing. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair and nodded. "Good. I like people with purpose." From that moment, everything changed. Sophia wasn't just surviving anymore. She was climbing. Under Adrian's mentorship, she learned the real game of wealth and power, the kind Lucas thought he had mastered. She attended elite gatherings, studied the way the rich moved, and built connections that would have taken years to establish on her own. And then, after 2 years of silence, fate placed Lucas Reed back in front of her. At a grand charity gala, Sophia walked through the towering glass doors, dressed in a sleek black designer gown, her hair falling in soft waves. She moved with the confidence of a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. Across the room, Lucas stood next to Olivia, holding a glass of champagne, laughing like he owned the world. Then, his eyes landed on her. The second their gazes met, his smile faltered. His grip on his drink tightened. He recognized her instantly, but the woman in front of him wasn't the same girl he had abandoned. Sophia tilted her head, smirked, and raised her glass ever so slightly. Lucas blinked, his expression unreadable, but she saw it. The flicker of unease, the faint hint of fear. He had no idea what was coming for him. Lucas had always been good at hiding his emotions, but Sophia saw it. The flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened as he took a slow sip of his champagne. For a man who had built his life on confidence, he looked shaken. He hadn't expected to see her, not like this. Not standing in the same elite circle that he had sold his soul to enter. Sophia let him sweat. She didn't approach him immediately. Instead, she moved through the room, effortlessly slipping into conversations with influential guests. People greeted her with respect, asked for her insights, and laughed at her carefully placed remarks. She wasn't a nobody anymore. Lucas was watching her. She felt his gaze burning into her back every time she spoke, every time she smiled, every time someone important leaned in to listen to her. He was trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out how she had gotten here. It wasn't long before Olivia noticed her too. The billionaire heiress had been wrapped in her usual charm, entertaining guests, flashing her perfect smile, but even she couldn't ignore the way Lucas's attention kept drifting towards Sophia. Olivia turned her head, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in the sight of the woman standing across the room. Sophia saw it, the silent assessment. Olivia Montgomery was no fool. She had spent her entire life surrounded by sharks, and she could smell the tension in the air. She knew something was off. The moment came faster than Sophia expected. Lucas couldn't help himself. He needed to know why she was there. He set his drink down and made his way toward her, keeping his movements casual as if he were simply strolling through the party. But Sophia knew better. She waited until he was close enough, then turned to face him with the kind of controlled confidence she had never possessed before. "Lucas," she said smoothly, her lips curving into a slow smile. "It's been a while." He stopped a few feet away from her, struggling to keep his expression neutral. "Sophia, I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm sure you didn't," she said, letting her eyes flicker over him briefly before returning to his face. "Then again, there are a lot of things you didn't expect." Lucas forced a chuckle. "I have to admit, I'm surprised. Last I heard you were..." He trailed off, searching for the right words. "Struggling. Disappeared. Broken." Sophia tilted her head slightly. "You didn't hear much, did you?" she said. "Because if you had, you wouldn't be so surprised." There it was, the tiny crack in his armour, a slight shift in his stance, the faintest crease in his forehead. He was trying to stay in control, but he couldn't hide his curiosity. Before he could respond, Olivia approached. "Sophia, is it?" Her voice was polite, but there was an unmistakable sharpness beneath it. She extended a manicured hand, her gaze cool and assessing. "I'm Olivia Montgomery." Sophia shook her hand without hesitation. "I know who you are." "And I know who you are," Olivia replied, tilting her head slightly. Lucas has mentioned you before. That was interesting. Sophia glanced at Lucas, whose jaw tightened slightly. Mentioned her in what context? I'm sure he has, Sophia said, keeping her tone light. We go way back. There was a pause. A subtle moment where all three of them knew the conversation wasn't as casual as it seemed. Olivia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm curious. How did you two meet? Sophia met her gaze evenly. The game had begun. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. He didn't want this conversation happening here, not in front of Olivia. But Sophia had no intention of making it easy for him. Oh, Lucas and I have a long history, she said, letting her words sink in. We built a lot together. I used to be very involved in his career. Isn't that right, Lucas? Lucas cleared his throat. That was a long time ago. Was it? Sophia mused, tilting her head. Feels like yesterday. Olivia's eyes darted to Lucas, suspicion flickering in them. She wasn't stupid. She could sense the undercurrent of something deeper. She could feel the tension, the unspoken words between them. Sophia wasn't here to attack yet, not directly. She wanted Olivia to question him, to start wondering about the past Lucas never talked about, to realise that the man she married might not have told her everything. I'd love to catch up sometime, Sophia said smoothly, her eyes never leaving Lucas. Maybe we can talk about old times. Lucas forced a smile, but Sophia could see the tension in his jaw. He was trapped. If he dismissed her, Olivia would wonder why. If he agreed, he'd be walking into her web. Olivia, still watching the exchange carefully, smiled politely. That sounds interesting. It was the perfect opening. Sophia had planted the first seed of doubt. Lucas knew it too. As the night continued, Sophia played her role effortlessly, making sure her presence lingered in Olivia's mind. Every time she caught Lucas's gaze, she gave him a knowing smile, a silent reminder that he hadn't gotten away with what he had done. By the time the gala ended, Lucas was visibly tense. Olivia, though still composed, was quieter, thoughtful. Sophia walked out of that event, knowing she had already started to crack the perfect world Lucas had built. And this was just the beginning. Sophia knew the battle wasn't going to be won in a single night. This was a game of patience, and she had learned how to play it well. The seed of doubt was planted, but now she had to water it, let it grow, let it consume Olivia's mind until she started questioning everything about the man she married. Sophia didn't need to rush. Lucas would destroy himself. She just had to give him a little push. Over the next few weeks, she made sure her presence became unavoidable. She appeared at the same elite events, engaged with the same powerful people, and subtly inserted herself into conversations that Olivia and Lucas were a part of. At first, Olivia kept her distance, maintaining her icy politeness, but Sophia could see the questions forming behind her carefully composed smile. Lucas, on the other hand, was growing more and more restless. He tried to act indifferent, but Sophia knew him too well. He was watching her, tracking her movements, waiting for her next move. He had always been the kind of man who liked to stay in control, but now, control was slipping from his fingers, and he didn't know how to stop it. The moment came when Sophia knew she had him exactly where she wanted. One evening, she was at an exclusive fundraiser, chatting effortlessly with Adrian Calloway and a few other high-profile investors, when she caught sight of Lucas standing across the room. He wasn't alone. He was speaking to a woman, one who wasn't Olivia. Sophia didn't react, but she observed. The woman was younger, stunning, and dressed in a way that suggested she wasn't just there for business. She placed her hand lightly on Lucas's arm as she laughed at something he said. And then Sophia saw it, the same look in his eyes that he used to give her, the same way he had started looking at Olivia before he left. History was repeating itself. Sophia turned her attention back to her conversation, but she stored that moment away. This was what she had been waiting for. She didn't need to expose Lucas. He was going to expose himself. Later that night, as guests started to leave, she stepped outside onto the balcony of the venue, enjoying the crisp evening air. She wasn't surprised when she heard footsteps behind her. "I need to talk to you," Lucas said, his voice tight. Sophia turned slowly, letting the silence stretch between them before she finally spoke. "Do you?" she asked, tilting her head, "because last time I checked, you were very happy pretending I didn't exist." Lucas exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Cut the games, Sophia. What are you doing?" She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not doing anything." "You're everywhere," he muttered. "You show up at every event. You talk to Olivia, you—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "What do you want?" Sophia took a step closer, lowering her voice. "What do I want?" she repeated. "Lucas, I don't think you understand. You took everything from me. You left me with nothing, and now you want to know what I want?" She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to understand how it feels to lose." Lucas scoffed, trying to regain his usual arrogance. "You think you can take me down? You think you can ruin me?" Sophia held his gaze. "I don't have to ruin you, Lucas. You'll do that all on your own." His smirk faltered for just a second. That was all she needed. She turned to walk away, but before she could step inside, another voice interrupted them. "Lucas?" Sophia didn't turn, but she saw his shoulders stiffen. She already knew who it was. Olivia. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Sophia waited, feeling the tension crackle in the air like an approaching storm. "What's going on here?" Olivia's voice was even, but there was something sharp beneath the surface. Sophia slowly turned, meeting Olivia's gaze. She could see it, the suspicion, the first hints of doubt beginning to take root. Lucas recovered quickly, forcing a casual smile. "Nothing. Sophia and I was just leaving," Sophia cut in smoothly. Then, with a small nod, she walked past them, leaving Olivia standing there, waiting for an answer Lucas couldn't give. As she stepped into the main hall of the venue, she allowed herself the smallest smile. She had just lit the match. Now she would watch the fire spread. Sophia didn't need to look back to know that Olivia was already questioning everything. Doubt was like a slow-moving poison. It started small, almost unnoticeable. But once it entered the mind, it spread until there was no escape. Olivia had just witnessed Lucas alone with her, and even though nothing had happened, the damage was already done. Over the next few days, Sophia stayed quiet, deliberately keeping her distance. She didn't need to push any further right now. Lucas and Olivia would do the work for her. She imagined the conversations happening behind closed doors, the way Olivia would start watching Lucas more carefully, replaying every interaction she had ever seen between him and Sophia. And then, the cracks started to show. At another high-profile event a week later, Sophia arrived dressed in a sleek emerald gown, exuding the confidence of a woman who belonged. She didn't seek out Lucas or Olivia, but as she made her way through the venue, sipping her champagne and engaging in effortless conversation, she didn't miss the tension between them. Lucas was on edge, constantly glancing Olivia's way, as if trying to gauge her mood. Olivia, on the other hand, was different. She still smiled for the cameras, still played the role of the billionaire's perfect wife, but there was something new in her posture, distance, calculation, suspicion. Then, it happened. Sophia was speaking with a well-known investor when Olivia approached her, wine glass in hand, her expression unreadable. "Sophia," she greeted smoothly. Sophia turned, offering a polite smile. "Olivia." How lovely to see you again." Olivia didn't immediately respond. She studied Sophia carefully, as if searching for something. A weakness, a motive, a lie. Then, with a tilt of her head, she said, "You and Lucas must have been very close." It wasn't a question. It was a test. Sophia met her gaze, unflinching. "We were." Olivia's lips twitched slightly, but not in amusement. "Funny how he never talked about you." Sophia's smile didn't waver. "That is funny." She paused, lowering her voice just enough to make Olivia lean in. "But then again, I suppose some things are easier to forget when they're inconvenient." Olivia's grip on her wine glass tightened. Sophia knew she had just given her something to think about. A carefully placed suggestion that Lucas had hidden the truth. Before Olivia could respond, Lucas appeared at her side, his expression immediately darkening when he saw Sophia. "What's going on?" he asked, forcing a light tone, but his eyes were locked onto Sophia. Olivia turned to him with a slow smile, as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, we were just talking, catching up on old memories." Lucas's jaw tightened. He knew Sophia was pulling Olivia further into her web, but he couldn't stop it without making himself look even more suspicious. Sophia decided to add just a little more fuel to the fire. She let out a small sigh, as if lost in thought. "It's been a long time, Lucas. Do you ever think about how things could have been?" Lucas stiffened. Olivia's smile dropped. For the first time, he was the one who had no control over the situation. If he brushed it off, Olivia would wonder why he was so quick to dismiss it. If he responded, he risked saying something that would expose him. Sophia watched it unfold in real time, the panic behind his eyes, the way Olivia's gaze turned sharper, colder. Finally, Lucas let out a forced chuckle. "The past is the past," he said, but his voice was tight. No need to dwell on it. Sophia held his gaze for a moment longer before nodding. "Of course." She set her empty glass down on the tray of a passing server. "Well, it was lovely catching up. I'll see you both around." And with that, she walked away, knowing full well that she had just thrown another knife into Lucas's perfect little world. Now, it was only a matter of time before it all fell apart. The night after the gala, Sophia knew the real storm was brewing behind closed doors. Olivia wasn't the type of woman to let things go. She had been raised in wealth, surrounded by power-hungry men, and she understood the importance of control. If there was one thing Olivia Montgomery hated, it was not knowing the full story. Sophia imagined the conversation that must have taken place between them once the cameras were gone, the doors were closed, and they were alone in their lavish penthouse. Olivia wasn't stupid. She had seen the way Lucas reacted, the way his jaw had clenched, the slight hesitation in his voice. And hesitation was as good as guilt. Sophia didn't hear from either of them in the days that followed, but she didn't need to. The damage had already been done. Then, late one evening, as she was reviewing reports in her office, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring twice before answering. "Sophia Rivera." A pause. Then Olivia's voice came through the line. "We need to talk." Sophia's lips curled into a slow smile. Right on schedule. An hour later, she arrived at an exclusive rooftop lounge, the kind of place only the ultra-rich frequented. Olivia was already there, sitting at a private booth near the edge, a half-full glass of red wine in front of her. Sophia slid into the seat across from her, setting her clutch on the table. Olivia studied her, swirling the wine in her glass absent-mindedly. "You're an interesting woman," she said finally. "And I don't say that often." Sophia smiled slightly. "I'll take that as a compliment. Take it however you like." Olivia leaned forward slightly, her piercing blue eyes locking onto Sophia's. "I want the truth. No games, no cryptic messages, just the truth. Who were you to Lucas?" Sophia didn't look away. I was everything to him. Until I wasn't. Olivia's fingers tightened around her glass, but she remained composed. He said you two dated a long time ago, but that it wasn't serious. Sophia let out a soft chuckle. Is that what he told you? She leaned back, crossing her legs. He must have left out the part where I helped him build his company. The part where I spent my last savings investing in him, only for him to walk away the moment he found someone richer. Something in Olivia's expression shifted. You invested in him? Yes, and not just money. Time, effort. My entire life revolved around helping him succeed. He used to tell me we were in this together. She exhaled softly. Until he decided he didn't need me anymore. Silence hung between them. Sophia could see it happening. The doubt, the realization that Lucas had never been completely honest. I don't believe in coincidences, Sophia, Olivia said finally. You didn't just suddenly reappear in this world after all these years. You're here for a reason. Sophia met her gaze head on. Maybe I am. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. Are you trying to ruin him? Sophia tilted her head slightly. What do you think? For the first time that night, Olivia looked unsettled, as if she wasn't sure whether she should feel threatened or intrigued. You're playing a dangerous game, Olivia warned, though her voice held more curiosity than caution. Sophia smirked. And yet, you called me. That was the moment she knew. Olivia wanted to hear more. She wanted the truth, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. It was only a matter of time before Olivia started questioning everything, and once she did, Lucas would have nowhere left to hide. The moment Olivia walked into that meeting, she had already started turning against Lucas. She just didn't know it yet. Sophia saw it in the way Olivia had leaned in, the way she had asked her questions, the way she hadn't defended Lucas. Olivia Montgomery was a lot of things, privileged, powerful, calculating, but she was not naive. She had spent her whole life surrounded by men who were only loyal to power. And now, for the first time, she had to wonder, had Lucas ever truly loved her? Or had she just been his next step up? Sophia didn't push further that night. She let Olivia sit with the information, let the doubt fester, let it grow. Olivia was used to being in control, but Sophia had just introduced chaos into her perfect little world, and chaos had a way of turning everything upside down. The cracks widened a week later. Sophia had just stepped into an art gallery event, another gathering of the city's wealthiest, another chance to watch Lucas's world unravel. She barely had time to make her rounds when she saw Olivia, standing near a champagne tower, her arms crossed, her gaze sharp. Lucas was standing beside her, and from the way his jaw was clenched, they were in the middle of an argument. Sophia didn't approach. She didn't need to. Instead, she watched. Olivia spoke first, her expression controlled, but her voice sharp. I asked you a simple question, Lucas. Lucas let out a frustrated sigh, gripping his champagne flute a little too tightly. And I already told you, Sophia is just someone from my past. I don't know why she's suddenly everywhere, but it has nothing to do with me. Olivia's eyes narrowed. She says otherwise. Lucas exhaled, looking around as if making sure no one was paying attention. She's manipulating you. She wants to get in your head. Olivia didn't blink. That's interesting, she said coolly, because the only person who's ever lied to me is you. Silence. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. Olivia, I love you. You know that. Olivia let out a short, humorless laugh. Do I? She asked. Because I've spent the past few days looking into Sophia Rivera, and guess what I found? Her name on the early financial records of your company. Old photos of the two of you together, looking very much in love. A rental agreement for an apartment you two lived in. She tilted her head. Tell me, Lucas, if she was just someone from your past, why did you erase every trace of her? Lucas's expression darkened. He was cornered. Sophia didn't need to hear the rest. She could see it written all over Lucas's face. He was losing control, and it was only going to get worse. As the night went on, Sophia made sure to stay in Olivia's periphery. Every time Olivia glanced her way, Sophia was either laughing with powerful investors or engaged in conversations that mattered. She was no longer the abandoned woman Lucas had discarded. She was competition. And then came the final twist of the night. As Sophia was heading toward the exit, she heard a familiar voice call her name. She turned, expecting Lucas, but instead, Olivia was standing there. Walk with me, Olivia said, her expression unreadable. Sophia followed her outside onto the terrace, where the city lights stretched endlessly before them. The air was crisp, thick with the weight of unspoken things. I ran a background check on you, Olivia said finally. Sophia wasn't surprised. I'd be disappointed if you hadn't. Olivia let out a short breath, shaking her head slightly. You're impressive. You rose from nothing in just 2 years. People don't do that unless they have a reason. Sophia met her gaze. I do. Olivia studied her for a moment. Then, softly, she asked, Are you here to destroy him? Sophia didn't look away. Yes. Olivia exhaled, looking down at the city below them. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Good. Sophia stilled. Had she heard that right? Olivia turned back to her, something new in her expression, something sharp, determined, a woman who had just made a decision. Lucas thinks he's untouchable, Olivia murmured. He thinks I'll never leave him because of my family, because of my reputation. A pause. Then, a small, dangerous smile. He's wrong. Sophia raised an eyebrow. And what do you want, Olivia? Olivia lifted her glass, staring into the golden liquid. Then, in the coldest voice Sophia had ever heard, she said, I want to watch him burn. For the first time that night, Sophia truly smiled. She hadn't just planted doubt. She had created an ally. Sophia had expected Olivia to turn against Lucas eventually, but she hadn't expected it to happen this quickly. It seemed Olivia wasn't just suspicious. She was furious. And a woman like Olivia Montgomery, when betrayed, was more dangerous than any enemy Lucas had ever faced. After their conversation on the terrace, Sophia remained silent, waiting for Olivia to make the next move. She didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Olivia sent her a message. Meet me. We have work to do. The address Olivia provided wasn't a restaurant or a club. It was a private estate outside the city, far from prying eyes. When Sophia arrived, she was greeted by a sleek black gate, security guards, and a driveway that led up to a glass-walled mansion. Inside, Olivia was already waiting, sitting in a grand, modern living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. She wasn't wearing her usual designer gowns or perfectly styled hair. She looked calm, calculating, and ready for war. Sophia sat across from her, crossing her legs. I take it you've made up your mind. Olivia swirled the whiskey in her glass. I always knew Lucas had secrets, she admitted. I just didn't care, until I realised I might be one of them. Sophia leaned back. You did your own digging. Olivia smirked. Of course. I had my father's private investigators pull everything on Lucas. Bank statements, deals, conversations he thought were private. She paused, then looked at Sophia. You were right. He used you. But what's worse? He's been using me too. Sophia wasn't surprised. How? Olivia took a sip of her whiskey before setting it down. At first, I thought he just married me for status. That didn't bother me. I've seen it before. But then I looked deeper. He's been embezzling money from my father's company. Small amounts, just enough that no one would notice at first. She exhaled sharply. Until now. Sophia's eyes darkened. This was bigger than she thought. I take it you have proof. Olivia smiled coldly. Every document, every shady transfer, and if I wanted to, I could bury him today. Sophia studied her carefully. Then why haven't you? Olivia leaned forward, her gaze sharp. Because ruining him quietly isn't enough. Sophia felt a slow smile spread across her lips. You want to destroy him publicly. Olivia's eyes gleamed. I want him to suffer. I want everyone to see him for the fraud he is, and when he falls, I want it to be permanent. Sophia admired her resolve. Olivia had been raised in privilege, but she had claws. She wasn't the type to sit back and cry over betrayal. She was the type to set fire to the kingdom and watch it burn. They spent the next hour going over every detail. How Lucas had carefully hidden his theft, how he had manipulated people into covering for him, and, most importantly, who still trusted him. We can't just expose him, Olivia said, scrolling through her phone. We have to make sure he has nowhere to run. Sophia nodded. That means hitting him on all fronts, his reputation, his business, his marriage. Olivia smirked. Well, he's already lost his marriage. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You're leaving him? Olivia's smile widened. Oh, no, not yet. She leaned in. If I leave him now, it'll be a clean break. He'll cry for the cameras, play the heartbroken husband, and people will pity him. I want to break him first. Sophia couldn't help but be impressed. Olivia wasn't just walking away. She was going to make Lucas feel every ounce of betrayal, just like he had done to them both. They crafted a plan. First, Olivia would pretend to be clueless, giving Lucas a false sense of security. Meanwhile, she would start moving her assets, cutting off his financial access without him realizing it. Next, Sophia would leak certain details to the press. Nothing direct, just enough to start rumours. A questionable business deal here, a hint of financial trouble there. Once the media caught on, they would do the rest. But the final blow? That had to be personal. Sophia smirked. We need to make sure he's so distracted that he doesn't even realise the walls are closing in. Olivia's lips curled into a wicked smile. Oh, don't worry, I have an idea. And just like that, Lucas Reed's days were officially numbered. Lucas had always prided himself on being a step ahead of everyone. He manipulated, schemed, and played his way to the top, always ensuring that no one ever got close enough to see his weaknesses. But what he didn't realise, what he had never prepared for, was that his two greatest mistakes had now become his greatest enemies. Sophia and Olivia didn't strike all at once. That would have been too easy, too kind. Instead, they made him bleed slowly. The first move was subtle. Lucas had always been meticulous about his finances, making sure his secrets were well hidden. But what he failed to consider was that Olivia wasn't just his wife. She was the heir to one of the most powerful business empires in the country, and that meant she had access to everything. It started small, a routine audit, one that had been ordered by Olivia's father's company, but in reality was planted by Olivia herself. On the surface, it was just a regular business review, something that happened every quarter. But in the background, every suspicious transaction, every shady investment Lucas had hidden, was being quietly uncovered. And Lucas had no idea. The second move came from Sophia. She had spent the past year building influence in the same elite circles that once dismissed her. She had become someone whose words carried weight, whose whispers could shift the tide of a business deal. So she started planting doubts. At events, she made offhanded remarks about Lucas's financial instability. She hinted at risky business deals, unsettled debts, whispered concerns. She never accused, just implied. And it worked. Investors started getting nervous. Banks began reviewing their partnerships. Lucas, once a rising star in the business world, was suddenly a risky bet. He could feel it happening. The shift. Deals that had once been eagerly offered were now being delayed. Investors who had once sought him out were now avoiding his calls. And then, the third move, the one that started to truly shake him. One evening, Lucas walked into his office only to find his financial accounts logged. Confused, he called his banker, only to be told that Olivia had revoked his access to their joint assets. His heart pounded. Why would she do that? He rushed home that night expecting Olivia to be waiting for him, but instead, he found her calmly sipping wine on the balcony, her phone in hand as if she had been expecting him. "You locked me out of our accounts," he accused, his voice sharp. Olivia looked up unbothered. "Did I?" she said lazily, setting her glass down. "Oh, that's right. I suppose I did." Lucas's eyes darkened. "Why?" She tilted her head, amusement flickering in her gaze. "Because I don't trust you." His stomach dropped. "Olivia!" She held up a hand. "Save it." Then, slowly, she stood up and walked toward him, stopping just inches away. "You see, Lucas, I've been doing a little digging. Turns out you've been quite busy." He stiffened. Her lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Stealing from my father's company? That was bold. But lying to me? That was your biggest mistake." Lucas forced a laugh, trying to regain control. "Olivia, you're overreacting." She didn't let him finish. "Am I?" she interrupted, stepping even closer. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who should be worried." Lucas's jaw tightened. He had never seen Olivia like this before. She had always been sharp, but she had also been soft on him. That softness was gone. He swallowed hard. "We can fix this," he said, lowering his voice. "Whatever you think you know," she smirked. "Oh, Lucas," she shook her head. "I don't think. I know." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there for the first time in his life, completely powerless. But that wasn't the final blow. No, the final blow was still coming. Because just as Lucas was trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of his crumbling empire, Sophia was waiting with the last dagger. A week later, an anonymous tip was sent to the media. Leaked documents, evidence of Lucas's fraud, his hidden debts, his secret investments. The headline the next morning? Entrepreneur Lucas Reed, accused of embezzlement. Investors cut ties amid growing scandal. Lucas woke up to chaos. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails flooded in, panic from his business partners, demands for answers, reporters asking for statements. And then, the final betrayal. Olivia filed for divorce, publicly. With a carefully worded statement, she cut ties with him, stating that she had recently become aware of financial misconduct and that she had no involvement in his actions. Lucas had no escape. Everything he had built, everything he had schemed for, was gone in an instant. And Sophia? She watched it all happen with satisfaction. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment Lucas finally felt what it was like to lose everything. And the best part, she wasn't even done yet. Lucas was drowning. Everywhere he turned, there was another door slamming shut in his face. The same investors who had once fought for his attention now refused to take his calls. His business partners, his so-called allies, had distanced themselves overnight, desperate to avoid being pulled into his downfall. His once flawless reputation was in shambles. News channels dissected his every move, tabloids ran headlines about his fraudulent deals, and social media was ruthless. The man who had once climbed his way to the top by stepping on others had finally fallen, and the world was watching. But the worst part? The 2 women he had underestimated, the 2 women he had used, had orchestrated his destruction. Lucas was alone. He spent days holed up in his penthouse, surrounded by unopened legal documents and unanswered messages. The stress was eating at him, making him reckless, desperate. He wasn't used to losing. He didn't know how to exist without control. And so, in a final act of defiance, he made one last mistake. Late one evening, as rain pounded against the city, Lucas showed up at Sophia's apartment. Uninvited, unannounced. She wasn't surprised. When she opened the door, she found him standing there drenched, his eyes wild, his expression a mix of rage and desperation. "We need to talk," he said. Sophia leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "No, Lucas, you need to listen." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think you've won, don't you?" His voice was hoarse, filled with resentment. Sophia studied him carefully. He looked exhausted, worn down. For the first time, he wasn't the untouchable Lucas Reed. He was just a man who had finally met his reckoning. "This was never about winning," she said calmly. "This was about making sure you felt what it was like to lose." His fists clenched. "You ruined me." Sophia tilted her head slightly. "No, Lucas, you ruined yourself. I just made sure the world saw the truth." His breathing was heavy, his shoulders tense. "You used me," he muttered, shaking his head. "You and Olivia, you played me like a fool." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You're angry because we used you?" She let out a quiet laugh. "Tell me, Lucas, how does it feel?" Silence. Lucas exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "I never meant to hurt you." Sophia's expression didn't change. "But you did, and you never cared until you had something to lose." He didn't deny it. He couldn't. For years, he had believed he was untouchable, that he could betray, manipulate, and discard people without consequence. But for the first time in his life, he had been outplayed. And Sophia wanted him to sit in that realization. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice quieter now, as if he were trying to convince himself. Sophia smiled. "No, Lucas, I think I'll sleep just fine." And then, without another word, she shut the door in his face. It was over. Lucas Reed was finished. Sophia took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in years. Revenge hadn't just been about bringing Lucas down. It had been about reclaiming herself. For so long, she had been the woman who loved him, the woman who had given and given until there was nothing left. But not anymore. Now, she was the woman who walked away, the woman who built herself back up, the woman who didn't just survive, she thrived. As she poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto her couch, her phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. "It's done." Sophia smiled. It was. Lucas had taken everything from her once, but now she had taken back her power, and that was worth more than any revenge. Thank you all for listening to this story with our channel. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe to motivate us to bring more interesting stories. Much love to all of you.